Welcome to Moving Iron with Casey Seymour and Greg Peterson, the podcast for anyone and everyone involved and interested in the business of ag equipment. If you want to understand what trends and market forces are impacting the price of your iron, you've come to the right place. Buckle up, it's time to move some iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. This of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by John Deere. I've got Greg Machinery, Pete Peterson to talk about what's happening in the market. Greg, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Casey. How are you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing real good. It's I tell you what, we waited a long time to get some rain, and we finally, the last couple of weeks here, we've gotten some decent, it's funny, you increase your sales by 20% and you go from, selling 10 to selling 12. You've done that, right? So this is the rain that we're having right now is, we're up 100% because it rained, a quarter of an inch. So there you go.
We're the same in Minnesota here. Last weekend, we had wildfires across northern Minnesota.
Oh, wow.
We got some good rain Sunday night into Monday, so I think it helped a little.
Yeah, it's been actually we got a frost warning going on. We got some potential to see some freezing temperatures here over I think it's tonight and tomorrow night, so into tomorrow, so it'll be interesting to watch.
Whipsaw time of year, isn't it?
Oh, I'll tell you what, don't, just because it's May doesn't mean winter's over. You know what I mean?
Don't get too cocky.
You gotta watch yourself. Yes. All right, man. There is, you brought some pretty good points up as we were talking about what we're going to talk about on this podcast. And you talked about the number of auctions that were up and then the machines associated with those auctions and what that looked like. So talk a little bit about what your findings are.
Yeah, I've just recently, Casey, been, such a unique market right now. I've been saying on our past episodes, and other stuff I do for Farm Journal or YouTube or a TV show or whatever, I just haven't seen it like this before, where values on at least good condition used are holding to strengthening a little bit. I'm not saying all used is up. I mean, it's got to be what people want, but that stuff is been pretty strong. At the same time, every time I've seen that over the past 3.5 decades, that is always, previous to this, correlated to good conditions for new equipment sales. But this is the first time they've become disconnected. So data points I got digging around, it's been a very busy spring. And so I looked at the raw number of equipment auctions, which we have a method of kind of compiling that on the backside of our machinerypete.com website, because I've been tracking this stuff for so long, working with over 1,500 auction companies. What I found through May 7th, Casey, was pretty eye-opening. The number of equipment auctions our data is showing is increased 19.5% versus last year. And that data point in and of itself, not super surprising. I mean, it's been challenging long enough that on the top end, we're seeing more farmer retirement sales from folks who are maybe, upper 60s to in their 90s or late 80s, just deciding maybe to stop the equity drain. Mm-hmm. So that makes sense. And then we've definitely seen more auction events, sort of partial auction events. You can wordsmith them a million different ways, but basically farmer equipment reductions. They're not retiring, but they're just paring down the equipment line, probably lender driven, of course. So, and then I think the third piece is there's so many regional online auction companies popping up that are gaining footholds. And you swirl it all together, and so again, it's almost a 20% jump in the raw number of auctions. Now, conversely, I also hopped in and was poking around. You and I have been talking a lot about, the cause and effect here of very slow new equipment sales for a number of years. And what our data shows is 1 to 3 year old equipment units, 19.9% fewer sold at auction through May 7th than last year. And if we break that down into some specifics, you could look at tractors down 23%. Now, that's all kinds of tractors, big, small, but 1 to 3 year old down 23% versus last year. Harvest equipment, so not just combines, but heads, down 13.7%. If you want to get more specific on small tractors, under 40 horse is down 34.5% versus last year. planting equipment, seeding equipment is down 25%, and tillage is down 28.6%. Despite the fact we have 19.5% more auction events. But the events are featuring less 1 to 3 year old stuff. So to me, they can seem wildly opposite, but they make perfect sense based on what we've been seeing out there. And again, I think the thing with the 1 to 3 year old stuff, we have to go back 2 years ago to 24. About the spring is when it started really kicking in. Dealers across the U.S. and Canada collectively trying to get ahead of it and really cranked a lot of equipment out to auction, a lot of late model equipment out to auction because they're paying 8% interest.
Yeah.
And now 2 years later, we're getting this. And again, I just haven't seen this. So these 2 data points are really, really interesting. And now with the war and the price of fuel and fertilizer, and we've talked to people know I don't like making predictions, but if this lingers much longer, these conditions, you would guess that it may foster even more auction events on both ends. On the upper side, older fellows, guys, folks deciding, well, okay, 2026, 27, maybe we'll hang it up. And unfortunately, on the bottom end of that K-shaped economy, you've got that increasing pressure, so you might have more of those type of auction events. So those are some of the things that I've been chewing on.
Yeah. I tell you, you brought up some good points there. So when you take a look at a couple of things, one is the dynamics in the marketplace right now, and you're looking at what's going to drive the sale of equipment, right? And the short answer is not much, right? There's just the dollars and cents that are there associated with that are in just a bad spot, right? So we're trying to figure our way through that. You take a look at like where I'm at out here, where you've got the amount of water that's going to come out of the mountains for irrigation is just not there this year. So that's going to be you have an entire segment of the farming population that's not going to plant a crop, right? It's going to go into prevent, and so there's some things that come along with that and those kind of things. But it's a big dynamic that's going to play in that. So you couple that with crop prices, you couple that with kind of run down the list of things that are there. It's interesting to watch how the auction market is reacting to those things, right? Because I get the 1 to 3 year old stuff for 2 reasons. One is dealerships out there right now taking a look at what they have, and they're not really ready to run it through the auction yet, and because of the hits that are going to be associated with that. And if it does go to an auction, you have to have buyers show up that want to spend $400,000+ to $500,000 for something like that. I mean, again, the buyers associated with that are going to be are kind of driving that marketplace. The tough side of this, Greg, is that it's just like there's a lot of things out there that are pointing towards just how much more gas is in the tank. And I think that's the question I keep asking people. When you look at what's out there, and are we really headed to a bigger, more dynamic issue in the farm economy than what we can even direct now? It'd be interesting to see what happens, right? Because we had Xi Jinping and President Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump got together, and all this stuff came out about how he's gonna come out and buy all these beans and all these kind of things, and be interested to see how the market reacts to that, and what does that look like, and what's the time frame, and how soon, and all that kind of stuff. It'd be interesting to see how the market reacts to that, right? Because it was a pretty substantial number on top of what they're already doing, supposedly doing on top of that. So it'll be interesting to watch how that plays out, right? But as it sits right now, there's just so much pressure on the market from every angle, right? I mean, there's not usually when something like this happens, you have some angles that are like, okay, we can go down this path. It's not nearly as bad. We can go. I don't see a clear path anywhere that shows any real dynamics of alleviating any pressure, and that's the sad part about what we see happening right now.
Yeah, you're right, Casey. There's just not a lot of positivity. I mean, it was welcome news from the visit to China, but again, I think the market and people, they're not being jaded. They're just being realistic. They're like, okay, well, announcements are awesome, but is the ink dry, and is this going to happen? So hopefully, we could argue that. The one thing it is interesting. I take those two data points again. When you look at particularly the number of 1 to 3 year old units, the drop sold at auction so far this year. If we really step back far, if you were putting on your manufacturer's shoes, of course, now we have the farmer viewpoint, the struggles, the pressure, the realities they're dealing with, stretching out their equipment life. Then you have the dealer reality, which is, trying to manage inventory and hopefully new sales get going. Then there's the manufacturer corner. The one positive for me for the space long term, again, mostly talking about from the manufacturer point of view, is that the overhang of 1 to 3 year old stuff is not what it was 10 years ago or frankly in any previous downturn of this magnitude. Now, again, if you're a manufacturer, all you're waiting for is a spark. It's like, okay, corn and beans, wheat, everything shoots up. Here we go. Farmers got money. They spend it. They got to update things. But back to your point, where's that positivity going to come from? Now,
Right.
We all know farming. I mean, in agriculture, it's very cyclical, but there is a growing tiredness, no question. I deal in data, hard numbers, and we analyze all that. But I also, just from humans in this space, you talk to a lot of people and you listen to a lot of things. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. But it was on a podcast, a farmer podcast, about a week or 2 ago, and it was a really interesting comment from a younger farmer. And he had to be my age, I'm 60 or whatever, and it's easy to be the gray-haired guy going, oh, back in my day, blah, blah, and that's fine. But this young farmer chimed in and said, if I could just have 1,000 acres and it paid for equipment and a semi that was paid for, man, I'd be happy as a clam. So that's really interesting to me because this, from the mindset, frankly, if you're doing an ag podcast, you're probably most likely a pretty progressive type of producer with eyes looking ahead and growing your operation and stuff. And then to hear that mindset, which is just being very honest, I thought, and it's a reflection of all these mounting pressures. It was already bad, and now you piled in what's fuel cost? Oh my God, what fertilizer? And okay, we can maybe muddle through 26, but what the hell does 27 look like? That's concerning. But over the arc of time, you look back, these periods do present opportunities for everyone in the space, for farmers, the dealer side, manufacturer side. Now, none of it's easy, but this is a real period of change, and this is different than anything I've seen before by a factor that's really even kind of hard to write about.
Yeah. Well, that's, you can sit and say, there's plenty of opportunities that come, and it's what your position is when you get to those opportunities.
Yeah.
Here's my biggest
powder dry.
Yeah, exactly right. One of my biggest fears about this is that we do go out and you see a step up in the marketplace. My biggest thing with that is the hole of which they have to dig themselves out of when they do get that capital. Yeah. So when you start looking at where's that going to go, and you're going to plant next year's crop, and you're going to get right at the bank, and then you're going to whatever's left over, you might move forward. My biggest fear that I have right now with a lot of this stuff is that when it comes to new sales of equipment, that's going to be a small percentage of the farming population that can afford to go out and buy that. And then the slightly bigger side that can buy the 1 and 2 year old used stuff, and the slightly bigger stuff, so on and so forth. What I have a concern about in the marketplace is that when you get to that 5 to 10 year old stuff, which you go back and look at your auction data you just talked about, that's where the big boom at right now in the sales of that stuff. And if you're looking at how that stuff plays into the marketplace, in order to get a 3 to 5 year old piece of equipment on the marketplace, you have to sell a 1 to 2 year old piece to somebody so they'll trade that in. Right. And then you have to do the same thing with, if you're looking for a 6 to 10 year old or something like that, you got to trade a 3 to 5 year old piece to sell that to somebody so you can trade that piece in. And you start the diversification as it comes across the landscape, that kind of leaks out across the entire industry. We're talking all the way from dealership side to the farm shed to wherever it might be. If you start looking for something and it gets real tight to where you can't find it, that drives prices around to where when the next time that stuff starts to normalize out again, where were you at on the scale when you bought that? Right. Same thing that came through COVID, right? Same thing that came through to the 2000, 10, 11, 12 boom, right? Where were you at when you bought that stuff? And then when it comes back in your marketplace, what do you, when you go to trade it, what's your equity position look like and those kind of things? Now, I personally think we've hit a new normal in what the market looks like. I just don't see where manufacturers are going to go out and push out, hundreds of, thousands and thousands and thousands of machines like they have done in the past, just because with the population that can afford to buy it, right? That's what it comes down to. Even at any discount structures that you're talking about, those kind of things, like, again, it just comes back to who can afford to buy it. So the amount of equipment that's going to hit the marketplace year over year is going to be small, but if you have one machine and you don't have any buyers for it, you get one too many, right? And that's where we're at right now. And I think as you look at the marketplace, as things tend to smooth out, once we start seeing things roll again, there's going to be a hunger for maybe 1 and 2 year old stuff. There could be, but that gap, that 3 to 5 year old stuff, and that 6 to 10 year old stuff is really what's going to be the hot market out there. And as I watch how quote unquote the new normal is going to take place, I look at it from the perspective of there is a dynamic shift in the marketplace as to where and what role a farmer has in and a rancher has in the equipment on their space and on their lots and in their yards and those kind of things. And the same comment can be made where what role does the dealership have in those machines that they have on their lot in the overall marketplace? Because you start looking at stuff that everybody wants, it changes the dynamics of how that machinery flows through the marketplace. And it opens up a whole Pandora's box of things that people aren't, A, I don't think thinking about, and B, preparing themselves for what's the quote unquote new normal look like.
Yeah, well, you've said new normal for quite a while, Casey, and you were right when you first said it, and you're right as rain today. And I'm with you. I, in my Norwegian way, tried to gently alert farmers to it in early 2015 or 2025. So coming on a year and a half ago, and you could just see it. Manufacturers that spigot was shut for new equipment, and frankly were kind of being told, I think, by dealers more so than ever, like, hey, we don't make it because that's not what we're about. Yes, we'll sell it, but we're worrying about getting rid of all this 1 and 2 year old stuff. So again, 2 years ago, I'd never seen that ocean of collectively dealers en masse selling that at auction. Now that has ramifications.
Sure.
And again, now we're 2 years down the road and we're starting to see this. So the swirl, and this is to your point, this is the dangerous thing for farmers in the space, thinking about a downturn and how you navigate it equipment-wise. Maybe thinking about how you did it 10 years ago or how you did it in the, previous downturn in 96 to 98 when, dealers had way too much stuff. Auction values dropped like a rock. The drop in auction prices this time was like a 1 year shot, a hard shot in 24. And you lived it, that last downturn. That was not a 1 year shot.
No.
Our auction data showed a big drop, end of 13, 14, 15 on. But again, it's different now. So you got to be eyes wide open. And to me, this tightening at the top end of the used equipment funnel because of lack of new sales and manufacturers just frankly closing plants, this is different. And this is, like you said, it is 100% the new normal. And now, if you're a farmer, you have to assess it, which I think they are. And I think the first phase of this was, it's like, well, we're not going to buy new in 25 and 26 and whatever for 27. We have a lot of equipment which we'd purchased over the last number of years, whether they were mud customers or not, wherever they are on the chain. Everyone on the chain was reassessing. Okay, well, let's stretch out the life. But then at some point, it's like, well, we have a combine issue or a plant. Okay, so they're turning to the used market.
Yeah.
And that's why I've been just reporting these pricing has been stronger since the end of 25. We've seen this uptick. I'm looking at numbers today. You take a John Deere 8R 370 and the average auction price is up 14.1% this year.
Right.
And they say, well, how the hell does that make sense? It only makes sense in the totality of what you and I were just talking about.
Right. Yep.
And by the way, that average is 353, just over 353. So that's the new normal. And, from all sides of that, manufacturers, dealers, and farmers, we're all tiptoeing forward. And sometimes when I talk to the Wall Street crowd, I talk about, a spark or a match, a lit match. There's a box of matches sitting there, and no one knows an egg when corn and beans went up. We don't know why or when, but thing is, when the match goes, it goes.
Right.
And from where I'm sitting, it just looks like, and we hope the match goes, corn and beans go up. But boy, I'm telling you, when it goes, it's going to be tighter than 22 was, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I think it'll be tight. But it's a different kind of tight because in 22 there was still plenty of money going around. I mean, if you look at some of these operations, 40 to 50% of the money that was associated with them were tied back to various COVID relief programs, right? So I mean, and those are all taxable. True. That was all taxable income, right? So they had to do something with it, right? So as you start looking at today's marketplace, the difference is going to be a lot more organic when you start looking at how those things react. I can just tell you from experience. So when there's a huge gaping hole in the machinery marketplace, it stagnates the market and it actually does more damage than you think it does, right? I mean, you've seen all this stuff turn. Oh, this is great. Look at all this stuff going through auction. These things are bringing, all-time record high dollars and this, that, and other thing. That stagnates the marketplace on both ends of that. It's bookmarked by things that are dead in the water, whether we're talking things younger than them or older than them. And those are just the issues.
It's out of whack.
And it really does mess the market up in a lot of ways to where it drives behavior in a different manner than that's good. And then it also drives decision-making processes that, again, I think, I go back to this, say this again, whatever you're buying today, plan on having it for a while. Your next move shouldn't be in a couple of years, I'm going to go do something else with it, because you're absolutely buying, especially if it's falling into that 5 to 10 to 12-year-old range, you're buying it at the top of the marketplace. I mean, you're at the absolute top of the market. So, but odds are people that buy that kind of stuff aren't going to roll in 2 years, right? Their ideas, they're going to run it for a while, and that's what they're doing. So that being said, understand where you're at in the marketplace.
I think the one interesting thing too, we've touched on a little bit, is as this is stretched out for a longer period now, and it's a different world we live in, connectivity and social media and stuff. So the danger is, so when I said waiting for that spark, that was kind of based on the 36 years, what I've seen. When the spark goes, poof, auction values take off, new sales take off. Well, open question now, like that young guy I referenced who said, man, my dream, his dream has shifted. So all of a sudden, if corn and beans go up, and this has gone on long enough, is that guy going to default back into the previous mindset? Or is he going to carry some of this new mindset like, well, yeah. And like you said, there needs to be a period of making yourself whole again.
Right.
Dealing with what we've come through. And how many farmers have we lost? So I'm saying, you're saying 19.5% jump in the raw number of auction events. I mean, look at the dairy numbers. That's been just happening right and left. I mean, it's just cranking downward until you wind up where you are. And then it's like, well, how'd we get here? And it's like, well, water torture, drip by drip until here we are. So and again, that goes back to your new normal. So whenever, there's no positivity looking for like that spark's going to go. And then even if it does go, how does that play out? So it's just, we're kind of in uncharted waters here, which is interesting. But if you nut all of it down, as I try to right now, Casey, I see it in the auction prices, which always kind of tell stories. So yesterday, when I saw New Holland, some people might say it's a weird example, but an old New Holland 273 baler sold on an auction up in about an hour north of me in Randolph, Minnesota. Hamilton Auction Group had the sale, and it brought $4,250. Now I've seen over 600 of those things sold, and that's the sixth highest one ever. And it hasn't rained. It's dry as a bone here in Minnesota, but we all know what, could be hay equipment, could be planting equipment, anything. What's the new stuff cost? And here's an old bugger, a war horse, but ooh, that thing's nice. That thing is reliable. So there's the premium in a time when you'd say, well, why is there a premium on used equipment? Well, again, take everything we've said and swirl it together, and that's where we are.
Yeah, for sure. So much stuff to pay attention to, man. If you're listening to this and you're thinking about, hey, what's my next move? What's my next? If I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. If I'm going to trade this, I'm going to sell on my own. There's so many dynamics that play into that. Weigh all of your options thoroughly and really think about it, because there's no rush here, and the decision that you're making right now is going to be one you're going to have to live with for a couple of years at a minimum, and go. If you're selling, you're in a great spot. If you're buying, I'm not saying you're in a bad spot, but I think I really do believe this though, Greg. I think this. If you're buying or selling something right now, I think you have equally as many advantageous points as you do as disadvantages. I mean, I think so. I think you're an even. You're even. It just takes a little more thought, I think. Yeah.
I think again, what you just said equals what I said earlier about not all this down, and the focus is on the used side.
Yeah. Yep.
So, for example, on Friday, one of our followers, a friend of mine from New York, a farmer, sent me a note, and he said, Pete, I got a Hardy Ranger 2000 pull-type sprayer for sale. This bugger's like new. I bought it a while back. I thought I was going to get into some custom, and I just didn't have time. Got under 1,000 acres on it. He's a smart guy, really smart, and he's listed in our Machinery Pete website for $29,500. But in the listing, he says, kind of by the way, if you want a new Hardy 2000 Ranger spec like this, it's going to cost you $55,000 plus. So to your point, buyers and sellers, it's all that cost of new makes the used attractive either way. So someone's going to get a like new sprayer there at a good fair price from my friend Ed. Ed's going to hopefully be able to move it quickly. So yeah, that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. Lots to pay attention to, Greg, and appreciate you being on the podcast every week to talk about it. So if folks want to reach out to you and get more information about what you're doing, the easiest way to go to hit you up on your social media sites or go to machinerypete.com.
Yep, little message button on the bottom of machinerypete.com. Drop a note to our office. I did have a guy ask me last week, Casey sent me an email. He's from California, farmer, and he said, hey, Pete, I don't know if you do any of these Dear Abby type questions. And I was like, hey, bring it, man. He had a trade-in valuation question. He was very much on it, but just like your listeners, Moving Iron, it's like appreciate your feedback and gives us more good stuff to talk about, right?
Right on, for sure. Well, Greg, appreciate you. Sorry for all the delays today and all the technical hang-ups, so I appreciate you being patient.
No, thank you for your patience, Casey. Always fun to visit. We'll catch up next week.
Yep, we'll catch you again next week, Greg. Appreciate you. Stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcasts after these messages.
Well, there they are, mocking you.
See you next year, loser.
That weedy area that's got you thinking, man, I hate that spot. Wish I'd sprayed better. Get the last laugh with a sprayer upgrade from John Deere. Precision upgrades that can increase your sprayer's performance, like ExactApply, advanced nozzles to give you more control at more speeds. It's just one of the many precision upgrades you'll find at johndeere.com. Now, let's see who's laughing.
Looking for more accuracy, more productivity from your current planter? Let's get exact with precision upgrades from John Deere. Start with Exact Emerge and get accurate singulation and spacing at 10 miles per hour. Or choose Exact Shot to promote early root growth and cut fertilizer costs. And with Furrow Vision, save time by verifying seed depth right from your cab. Visit johndeere.com/planner upgrades and see why nothing runs like a deer.
All right, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. Got Shawn Hackett on to talk about what's happening in the world of commodities. Shawn is with Hackett Financial out of Boca Raton, Florida, and he's always nice enough to come on and talk about what's happening. Shawn, how you doing this morning?
Doing very good. Can't complain. Lots to talk about. We do live in interesting times for sure. So
I think that's the understatement of the day, Shawn. So that's like the bless your heart coming out of the South. You know, that's one of those things that has lots of layers to it. We're going to get into some of those layers today. Let's first off, before we go any further, let's make sure we address what happened with President Trump and President Xi. They got back together on Friday. If you read the fact sheets that came out and about how, you know, from an agriculture perspective, it looked like and feels like a home run for soybeans for sure. So I guess, Shawn, as you dissected all that stuff and started walking the way through that on Friday, what's your takeaways, and then how do you feel those are going to affect the market, and are you starting to see signs of that take place?
what was interesting is there was no communication on Thursday or Friday at all. And the market got absolutely smoked on Thursday and Friday. I mean, just smoked because everyone said, oh my gosh, it's a big nothing. And then all of a sudden on Sunday, late afternoon, early evening, they put out this White House communique suggesting that they agreed. Now, why they didn't put this out on Friday, I don't know, but they didn't. They waited till Sunday, and then and they indicated that they agreed. China agreed to buy $17 billion worth of additional U.S. agricultural products above and beyond what they already agreed to on soybeans, meaning different markets. They didn't say how much of specific markets. They just said what they already agreed to, which is 25 million metric tons of soybeans for the next each year for the next 3 years. They're going to buy 17 billion of other ag markets on top of that. If you just use the soybean price that we have today and you take the 17 billion at face value and you assume stagnant soybean prices for the next year, that would mean that China would approximately purchase around $28 billion worth of U.S. agricultural products. Prior to the first trade war, we were exporting $19 billion worth. And prior to this trade war, we are exporting about 30 to 31 billion. So this is a big deal. I mean, we're almost back. Now you could argue then the whole tariff thing really didn't do anything because we're just back to where we were. I'm not here to say it was good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying it's better to get 28 billion than what we had last year, which was about 15 to 16 billion. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it is now, I don't believe China is going to take out offers and gun the market and run it up. It just says they can buy it at any time, anywhere they want throughout the year. And they're committing to buying up to 17 billion of various products. What it says to me is they're going to buy when it's the right time for them to do it, when they think the price is right, or when they need to buy it because maybe they have bad crops. But I don't see them gunning the market up. What I really think this does is it limits how much downside we have. It's more, to me, it significantly reduces downside risks because on any dip, it can be pretty confident they're going to be large buyers under the market. But I don't think that this is from where we are today. Remember, we've had big rallies already in the market from the beginning of the year to now. But I don't think this is we're going to $6 corn on this or we're going to $15 soybeans on. I don't think that's we had a big down and now we had a big up. But I think it just means that the downside that we've seen in the last few years, which was pretty ugly, that bar has moved higher. So think of a higher floor now than we had before. And that's a good thing. and it should provide some stability to the market as we start going forward here with geopolitics and weather, which obviously are two factors that could certainly make grain prices go substantially higher. But I don't believe the trade deal, as it is, as it was communicated, means we're going much higher from here. I just think it dramatically limits how much downside we have.
Right. Okay. Real quick on the geopolitical side, as you look at what's with the Strait of Hormuz and what that looks like, I read through some of the fact sheets and stuff like that about what the rundown was. They both agreed that the Strait of Hormuz need to be open and no one need to be charged a toll and those kind of things. Whatever, it's easy. You can talk all you want about that until it gets open. It's whatever it is. Looking at the current fuel price, especially diesel, looking at diesel prices, and you're looking at fertilizer prices, Shawn, the pressure that you're seeing that put on the market today, obviously if something happened tomorrow and everything was going in and out of the strait, just like it should be, you're 6 months down the road before you really start to see any real alleviation of pricing when it comes to price at the pump. As you look at those two factors, how do you see that affecting the market as a whole? And do you feel like that'll put some undue strain on production, I guess, as you look at things move through the rest of this growing cycle?
I continue to believe politically, whether Trump wants to or not, or would like, he has to do something to show that he's reducing the rate of inflation. And the only way you're going to be able to reduce the rate of inflation, the perception of the rate of inflation, is you got to get crude oil prices back down. I don't mean back down to 50. I mean, but go from 100 down to 80 and stay at 80 or 75 or 85. He has to do that. He has to find a way to structure something that he can get that outcome and as you go into the midterm elections, so that he can show that they're moving back in the right direction and there was a reason for why he did this. And I believe he has to do it no later than June. If I'm thinking, because if you're really going to affect elections and you're really going to change the mind of let's say the independents that really decide these elections and many of these races that determine who's going to get the majority in the House and the Senate, I feel you kind of need to start getting the oil price moving down, and you need to start printing some lower inflation numbers because there's a lag, right? It doesn't happen immediately. So if you start getting the oil price going down in June, then maybe by August, September, you start getting some friendlier inflation numbers that are printed. You start seeing some lower prices at the pump, and then you say, hey, the policies are working, keep our guys in. I just feel that he has to be thinking about how to, and Besant, keeps saying, we're going to get the oil price back down. It may take a little while longer, but we're going to, that's the way I am seeing it in the short run. Now, after the election, whether he holds the majority or not, after that, I think the geopolitics devolves and explodes again and gets considerably worse. I don't think anything will be resolved. I don't think any of the tensions are going to go away. I don't think any of the issues are going to be solved. I don't think there's going to be any agreements that are going to change the trajectory of where we're going. I just think in the short run, there needs to be an impasse. In the long run, I believe that geopolitics are cycles that we follow longer term are going to get worse in 27, 28, leading to some type of a crescendo event. But the fertilizer price is going to be much more sticky, much, much more sticky. Even if the oil price came down to 80 or 85 and the Hormuz is, let's say, flowing a little better and all, I don't think that we're going to see too much of a decline in the fertilizer price. I think you could see a decline in the gasoline price. Maybe you get a decline in the diesel price, but the fertilizer price, I think, is going to remain extremely sticky. And I don't think there's going to be a big reprieve. And quite frankly, to get votes in the election, the fertilizer price doesn't need to come down. What needs to come down is the pump, the price at the pump, right. How much it costs to cool your house, heat your house, whatever, that sort of thing. So I think that's the yin and the yang. But in terms of what for agriculture, and for the fertilizer cost and for the yields that can be garnered from how much fertilizer can be gotten and how much you have to pay to get it, what those acres are, what kind of acres they're going to plant, what they're going to plant. It's all going to really restrict future production on an escalating scale. Our view is, I don't think we're going to see too much of that show up this growing season. The U.S. is, I think, okay. Europe is okay. India just bought a ton of fertilizer that they could get their hands on at a very high price, by the way, but they have it. So I think they're okay fertilizer-wise. The first growing season that I think fertilizer can become a major issue is the South American growing season. That's where I think they have not bought any fertilizer. They're very vulnerable to not getting what they need or having to pay an exorbitantly high price to get what they need. And they're going to have to alter their applications, their how much acres they plant. And if we're correct that a super El Nino is going to develop and peak in the fourth quarter, they could have the worst crop weather we've seen in central northern Brazil in 50 to 100 years, especially with the deforestation issues going on and the decrease in the moisture that we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years to go along with that. Just to put this in perspective, a La Nina normally means wetter weather for central northern Brazil. That's normally what a La Nina means. We had a La Nina this last growing cycle, and their precipitation through the entire growing season was barely better than the prior year, which was the El Nino growing season. Meaning we didn't get much rainfall bounce in a La Nina. If we go to a super El Nino in an environment where the Amazon monsoon is not firing up and they either can't get the fertilizer or the fertilizer price they have to pay is so exorbitant, they have to reduce fertilizer usage, I think we could be looking at major crop problems for the very first time, especially for soybeans. We've never really had a major crop problem in soybeans. The only crop problem we ever had that was moderate was the last El Nino in 2023, where we had yields down 10%. That was the greatest yield decline we've ever seen for soybeans. This could be and should be considerably worse. I think that's where the rubber meets the road on this fertilizer issue. And then it just keeps compounding from there, especially if I'm correct about geopolitics devolving after the elections. It ain't going to be any better in 27. In fact, it could be even worse.
Okay. All right. So switch over to talking about weather. Good segue there. As you look at the weather patterns in the United States right now, we've had, I'm sitting out here, it's 32 degrees this morning here. And if you, depending on where you're at, it gets significantly cooler. We had some pretty good snows over in the Rocky Mountains up into Montana yesterday and then the day before. So you're seeing the pattern develop here of just some very erratic weather. Like it's, we'll see really cold, really hot, really cold, really hot, and kind of everything in between. Shawn, as you look at this weather pattern, you talked about the Super El Nino. We are getting rain out here now where we couldn't buy a drop of rain for probably almost a year now. So if you're looking at the dynamics of the weather patterns and how they develop, how do you see that playing out through the end of the year?
We're at peak drought. In fact, we've already passed peak drought. If you look at the total amount of ground in the United States with a Palmer drought severity index, it actually peaked 2 weeks ago and it's now falling. And we believe it will continue to fall to where by the time we get to the fall, we're going to be looking at Palmer drought severity index at near the lowest that you're going to see. So the drought is over as a market moving situation. When you're moving into an El Nino, it's not unusual to have a dry spring because you have a carryover of La Nina. But the things you want to see that shows that the weather's going to change is the Southern Oscillation Index staying persistently in the negative phase. If that happens, then it shifts the winds in the Central Pacific from east to east, and all that record warm body of water that's just under the surface is then allowed to come to the surface. And that we have been in a negative phase of the Southern Oscillation Index now for 45 straight days. And in fact, we just got a big surge into like -20, -30 here in the last week. So that we are going to see this El Nino accelerate dramatically. So that is telling you El Nino is already here and it's going to continue to accelerate. And in the atmosphere, the global angular momentum is one of the key atmospheric responses if the atmosphere is starting to link up with the ocean sea surface temperatures. Typically, in an El Nino, you want to see positive global angular momentum. That means that the atmospheric winds are moving faster than the Earth, dramatically. If it's a La Nina and it's negative, it means that these atmospheric winds are very, very slow relative to the Earth. So global angular momentum has already moved into positive territory, and all indications are that it's going to move into strong positive territory as you move into late May, early June. That's an El Nino atmospheric response. When you get positive global angular momentum on a persistent basis, more rainfall, cooler temperatures in the central eastern grain belt. It doesn't mean for the west northwest. They're going to be really hot. If you're looking for a hot spot, Casey, Washington, the Northwest, west Northwest, they're going to be burning it up, okay? But not central east, central south, central southeast. We're going to be more temperate, and we're going to have timely rainfall. And the majority of the crops are grown in those regions. And even though there could be some issues, let's say maybe upper northern plains or the northwest grain belt or the far west grain belt, maybe there could be some problems there. The problems are not going to be enough to overcome just bin busting type yields in the center east, center west, center south, center southeast grain belt as we get this really good weather. History says whenever we've had a moderate to strong El Nino, since 1950, 50% of the time we've had trend line yields, and 50% of the time we've had above trend line yields, and 20% of the time we've produced record yields on a national basis. Those are the statistics. It's not my opinion. I'm just telling you what has happened when we've had these, and I don't see any reason to suggest otherwise. That at minimum we should expect trend line yields this year, and probably better. Probably better.
All right. So you touched on a little bit what's in Brazil, but kind of dive back into that Brazilian weather pattern. See, now we're seeing a lot of heat stress and those kind of things right there and down in Brazil now as we head into this their growing cycle that they're in right now. Looking at that same growing cycle through the end of the year, what are your thoughts on Argentina and Brazil?
Well, Argentina is finishing up their harvest. Brazil is going to be harvesting their corn here pretty shortly. I don't see any issues with the current crop, but the crop coming up, the growing season that starts September 15th, the first half of the growing season, which starts September 15th and goes to the end of the year, that's the soybean growing season. I think we could be looking at historic drought, historic heat, a major crop problem for soybeans. As I said, the issue we had in the last El Nino in 23 was the worst yields below trend we've ever seen in soybeans in central northern Brazil. This should be considerably worse with the Amazon failure of the Amazon monsoon to fire up because of the deforestation that we've talked about before. And I don't think it's going to get any better for the second half of the growing season, which is your second crop corn, and that's where the corn crop's produced. I'm really, really worried about big time crop problems. So if you think this through, big crops in the U.S., we're going to have to digest it. Probably some easing of geopolitics, getting some crude oil down. You could see how grain prices could fall here from where we are now into August, September. But because of the trade deal expansion, it's going to limit how far we can fall compared to where we've fallen the last couple of years. So even though I think we're going to see lower prices, I don't think we're going to see prices as low as we've seen the last few years. In fact, a much higher level low. Once we digest the U.S. crop, and we start getting into South American growing season, wow, I think things could get pretty wild with the weather volatility. Geopolitics fires back up again. And in the U.S., we could be looking at floods, excessive rainfall during harvest, a very slow harvest, a very disjointed harvest, a lot of quality problems with our harvest, a lot of disease issues with our harvest, and that's going to take what's initially going to be bearish large crop, and it's going to quickly turn into, well, It's a large crop, but we're not going to see it as quickly as we thought. And a lot of it's not going to be the quality that we thought. So the quality amount is going to shrink versus what the market had been anticipating. And then if you look overseas, where the big, other than central northern Brazil, Asia is just in the crosshairs. I mean, I think India, China, Southeast Asia, and Australia for the back half of the year, this year, are looking at very, very potentially ugly, hot, dry, potentially historic drought type conditions for their crops. What are the big crops? Sugar in India, rice in India, winter wheat, not in this growing season, but winter wheat in India. Obviously, the northern plains for China is big on corn and soybeans. And of course, rice is grown all over what I just mentioned. And of course, Australia is very, very big on wheat. So as we get further on into the season and we start really looking at what I think is going to be some historic droughts in the Asian region, this is going to set off another. The only way you really get the market worried about food, about scarcity, about survivability, about famine, it's rice and wheat have to get into short supply in order to generate that type of herding or hoarding mentality in agriculture. And the way you get that is to get Asia in trouble. I'm not wishing that upon Asia at all, but it is a cycle we're in. And if this El Nino develops like the feedstock that's there right now, if you look at the amount of warm water that's under the surface, it's the biggest body of warm water we've ever seen under the surface since we've been measuring this. Only Super El Nino that we could be looking at, if this develops the way we believe, is the 1877 to 1878 El Nino, which to this day was the strongest El Nino that we've ever had. It wasn't necessarily the strongest because it reached temperatures that were that much warmer. It's that it stayed warm for a longer period of time, meaning normally El Nino peaks and it falls very, very quickly. But the 1877-78 El Nino, we had record warm sea surface temperatures in the Central Pacific for like 5 straight months. That has not happened since. And so that's what we would be looking for, is when we get to that record temperature or near record temperature, do we stay there or we come straight back down? If we stay there, then we could be looking at the type of weather that occurred in 1877 and 1878. It was the worst drought India had seen in 500 years. It was the worst drought China had seen in 500 years. Asia had not seen a drought like that in 500 years, and they haven't seen a drought like that since. We look at tree reconstructed Palmer drought severity indices for these regions at that time, and it was black. How bad things were. The other corroborating factors to watch is, I think many people know that Sahara dust reduces hurricane activity here in the U.S. when you get that dust that comes over from Africa, because it dries the air out and it suppresses moisture. The same thing happens in Asia. There's this wind flow from the Middle East that flows towards India, China, and Asia. And when those winds are particularly strong, they can force sand into the atmosphere, suppressing the Asian monsoon for an extended period of time. And El Nino was already doing that. Remember, El Nino is already suppressing the monsoon. And then if the dust is there doing it on top of it, it can really be something else. We're monitoring these winds, and typically in any year that they occur, you tend to see them start up in May. You get an early start to it. We're seeing some historic dust in the atmosphere already. It's in northern India, like not just there, like it's in high concentrations. That is suggesting that we have likely developed. Usually once you develop an upper airflow pattern in May, it'll continue on into June and July. That's the history of it. We had that in 1877. The last time we had high dust in the atmosphere in Asia was the weak to moderate El Nino of 2002. And that year, India had a 50-year drought. Because we didn't have a 100-year drought because it was not a strong one El Nino. It was a weak, moderate. But with the dust, it made it a 50-year drought. And Asia had 50-year droughts. So that was the last time we've had one of these dust scenarios play out like this. The last thing, and we can stop here, is the Indian Ocean dipole, which is the sea surface temperature differential from the West Indian Ocean to the East Indian Ocean. Typically, if in an El Nino, typically you have a strong positive Indian Ocean dipole. That means that the waters here are warm, and it actually helps pump moisture into India and into Western Asia, but it deprives East Asia of moisture. So what it does is it tends to reduce the drought effects of El Nino in the West Asia, but it tends to enhance it in the East. But it's not an all-encompassing drought. It's a half good, half not so bad. Okay, to get everybody's in trouble drought, you need to have the Indian Ocean dipole more neutral, where you don't really have much of a differential, where you're not. So neither side is getting deprived, but neither side is getting pumped, which means if you have a strong El Nino, then it's free to do what it does on top of the dust. Right now, we have a neutral Indian Ocean dipole. There are 3 outfits that produce models on an Indian Ocean dipole. One is the Australian Atmospheric Association, or BOM. You also have JAMSTEC, which is a Japanese model. And then you also have the IRI model that produces indications of Indian Ocean dipole. 2 out of the 3 models have a neutral Indian Ocean dipole through July. The IRI has a moderately positive through July, but put in total, nothing is suggesting we're going to have a strong Indian Ocean dipole. In fact, it could be fairly marginally neutral. If that forecast turns true and we have this dust in the air and we do continue to develop this El Nino at the rate of acceleration that we're seeing, we have the potential to see similar effects in Asia like we did in 1877 and 1878. In most years, there is 0 chance for this to happen. But there's a decent chance this could happen. It may not happen. A lot of things have to go right, okay? But we have the possibility, Casey, that this could happen. And if you know the benchmarks and the signposts to follow, you can start increasing or decreasing the probabilities. But I'm extremely worried about if this happens in Asia at a time of high fertilizer price, at a heightened geopolitical instability, and then going into a potential central northern Brazil major crop problem. I mean, you could be coming into the spring next year, Casey, with a wild situation on your hands. So my advice to anyone to weigh those risks that I just mentioned, if you're on the buy side of corn, the buy side of wheat, the buy side of soybeans, meal, rice, I think you're going to have an opportunity to get yourself buttoned up here in August, September, when we trade the large U.S. crop. After that, I think it's going to be very, very hard to expect that we're going to see prices remain subdued. I think we're going to be looking at something very substantially higher. And in the livestock business, in the ethanol business, in the renewable diesel business, in any business that you're in, you've got to manage your input costs here to the best of your ability. And even in energy, if I'm right, we get this knockdown here into the elections, you've got to lock in that energy while you're getting some reprieve, because I don't think it's going to get any better once we get past that period. That's the message. That's the risk management strategy that we're putting forth to our customers. And I hope those listening and watching your incredibly valuable show heed that risk and take appropriate action to manage that risk on the farm.
Right on. Last question for you here. With the warming of the sea surface temperatures and those kind of things, as we head in, we're 2 weeks away from hurricane season starting, how active do you think this hurricane season is going to be compared to what we've seen in the last 3 years?
It should be very, very low. I always say a terrible hurricane season is if one hurricane hits you. So when Andrew hit South Florida, by the way, the Category 5, that was the only hurricane that we had all season. It was a very, very mild hurricane season. For South Florida, it was a disaster. So the answer is it should be a low active year. Doesn't mean a big one won't hit somewhere and be a terrible year for where it hit. Sure. But we should not be looking at an active season this year. The active season this year is going to be that typhoon season out in the Pacific. It should be potentially record-setting for Asia. Another weather anomalous risk that you could be looking at historic drought, and then you dump 1 year's worth of rainfall in 1 week and create a worse problem. I mean, that is a real risk in Asia, that you have this El Nino dust, Indian Ocean dipole derived drought, and then you get a typhoon that just blows in and just ruins everything. I am really worried about Asia big time for those reasons.
Okay. Shawn, informative as always, man. Folks want to reach out to you and get more information about having you come speak at an engagement, or just more information about what you're doing over at Hackett Financial. What's the best way to do that?
Our website is Hackett, Hackett, advisors.com. We have our Twitter page, X page at FaradX11. And if you want to hire us or consider us for speaking at one of your conferences or a group that you have, where we go over all this and a whole bunch more, you can go to agspeakersnetwork.com.
Right on. Shawn, appreciate you being on the podcast. We'll catch you again next time.
Thanks, Casey. Always a blast.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week. And remember, Moving Iron is available on Farm Journal's YouTube channel and anywhere podcasts are found. So until next time, let's move some iron.